Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are live on July 17th. You are here for day 3 of the 5-day NAHASDA Essentials training presented by Cheryl A. Cosley. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that you could join us for today's webinar. If you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law picture. Just a friendly reminder that the materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Before we get started, I want you to know how to interact on the Adobe platform. So know that during the session, if you go up to the top of your screen and you click on that hand raise that has a plus sign on it, you could signal with that you are raising your hand, that you agree, disagree, that you're showing applause, laughter, or even signal requests like asking the instructor to speak louder or to maybe slow down, please. Your screen should look like this graphic I have displayed. So to the bottom left, you are going to see a pod that says files on it. There in that files pod, you'll be able to download a copy of today's slides, as well as all of the reference materials that Cheryl's prepared for you. So that second file is a list of what materials are available, and then there are about 33 of them, so quite a few to download. If you wish to download them onto your device, you'll just hover over the item that you want, and you'll click on that down arrow facing into a box, and that'll download it onto your device's download section. The next box over to the right is labeled web links. This is where you'll find our link to today's webinar feedback survey. You could join our email list to receive our weekly newsletter, stay in the know of all our trainings and webinars that we have coming up. You could connect with us on LinkedIn. And then I also have the links to the past couple of days recordings. So if you missed the essentials training for day 1 or day 2, both of those links are within. If you wanted to share those with a colleague that you thought should tune into the webinar, that's available for them as well. In that box is also any of the links that pop up during the presentation, but know that during the course of the presentation, I will copy and paste them into the chat. And Cheryl, I just saw what you said in the chat. And you are presenter once again. All right, folks. Then to the right of our web links pod is the chat pod. So this is how you can communicate with both the instructor and the NLC staff today during the webinar. Most of the questions you might have, Cheryl will probably answer through the course of her presentation. But if you think of something or think of a comment, go ahead and put it into the chat, and we'll make sure that it's answered at least by the end. All you have to do is click on that box where it says type here, type in your message, your question, your comment, and then you can hit enter, or you can click that little up arrow, and that will send it into the chat where all of us can see it. If you're having any kind of tech support problems, you can go ahead and send those into the chat, and I'll help you navigate as best I can. Know that most of the tech issues can be solved by just exiting and then re-entering the meeting room. But go ahead now, if you would, please. We can get that chat box going. If you want to introduce yourself, let us know your name, where you're joining us from, your tribal affiliation, your work or your role in Indian country. And then we can go ahead and get started. So with that, it's with great pleasure I introduce your webinar instructor, Cheryl Cosley. And this is NAHASDA Essentials Day 3. Cheryl, I'll hand it off to you now.
Very much. Wow.
Having a little bit of technical issues, guys. You heard the echo. So go ahead and just continue using the chat, introducing yourselves. Again, your name, where you're joining us from, tribal affiliation, and your role. And we will get Cheryl back on the call. Give us just a moment, please. Sorry about that, Cheryl. You've been upgraded to presenter once again. You should be good to turn on your mic.
Brooke, can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, and this time I'm not reverberating and I don't get a message you've been kicked out of this room. First
I'm
time
so sorry. I was only trying to take the extra out so it wouldn't echo, and it took you both out. I apologize for that.
No worries, guys. I've been booted. No, so welcome to NAHASDA Essentials Day 3. First time I've been booted. Welcome and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. My information is at the beginning and the end of the presentation, and this is courtesy of the Native Learning Center. I think most of you have been with me for the whole week. My name is Cheryl Cosley. My Anishinaabe name is Redbird Woman. I'm from Bay Mills, Keno-Shinkoning in my language. Bay Mills is a reservation located at the very top of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and our waters actually border Canada. We're Chippewa Ojibwe people. I served as the chairperson for the Great Lakes Housing Association, which is a 31 tribes in the Great Lakes area. And I also served on the board of directors for the National American Indian Housing Council. Started as the secretary, went to the vice chair, did that for 12 years, then became the chairperson for additional 4 years. And about 5 years ago, I started doing this, and I provide training and technical assistance all over the United States. I was in Alaska last week, so I'm very blessed to be able to do and continue to do what I love and help our people. So we'll go till 3:30 today. Remember, grab these reference materials. They're very, very helpful. As we go through the subject material, you'll see why they're there. Our objectives are to walk you through, the grants process, formula reporting, key issues in implementing the Indian Housing Block Grant, answer some of your questions, and provide a basic summary of some of the program rules and key elements. We're going to talk today about allowable activities and some of the Indian Housing Plan and APR. As you can see throughout the week, we're going to cover the gamut of things. So I hope you all learned something. We're going to continue with those allowable activities and talking about types of financing. So you can utilize grants, loans, deferred payment loans, cash flow loans, interest subsidies, principal reduction, and construction financing. You can leverage NAHASDA funds. Some of the examples are the Indian Community Development Block Grant, the Community Services Block Grant, Social and Economic Development Strategies Grants, utilize CDFIs, and resident opportunities for self-sufficiency. So your sources and uses of funds should always equal in a good world. Your cost and funds to complete your project help determine how much funding is needed to develop a property. Your sources are the funds you're going to use to pay those costs, and your uses are usually one-time use, and your sources should equal your uses of funds. So here's your example. If you can get a bank loan for $75,000, you're going to use your Indian Housing Block Grant, $75,000. You have a tax credit equity of $100,000 and state funds of $19,000. Your total sources are $269,000. Hopefully, your uses, your expenses are going to be the same amount or less. So land, $45,000. Construction estimates at this point, $165,000. Soft cost at $24,000. Different fees at $35,000. So you've got a $269,000 across the board. So you need to be able to utilize an operating budget. What is it? It determines your net operating income. It assesses the project feasibility over your long run, your income and your expenses. So things you need to consider, because you can't forget them, or they'll bite you in the end. Your management cost, your collection losses. You're never going to collect all the money that your tenants owe you. It doesn't happen in a real world. Your maintenance cost and the cost of utilities. they've been going up through the roof. Some of the other things you're going to have to consider when you go to set that rent, setting the rents. Remember, 30% of adjusted income is the most you can charge them unless their income falls between 80 and 100%. So you have minimum rents as long as you perform that 30% test. Remember, 30% of zero is zero. And we get the money from Congress to serve low-income Native Americans. Lower percentage of income, flat rate with a 30% test, a lower percentage allowed for certain families. So in some cases, I've seen elders, 10% or even 20% rather than the full 30. Have to be low income at the time of initial occupancy. Non-low income cannot receive the same benefits as your low income people. Your total tenant payment, your TTP, is the amount a tenant is expected to contribute for rent. It's based on a percentage of the adjusted income. For NAHASDA programs that cannot exceed 30% of that monthly adjusted income. You see what they want you to make sure that you remember at all times. Utility allowances are not required by NAHASDA. They used to be under the 37 Housing Act. Under NAHASDA, that's your decision. So they can be required or allowed by you as the recipient, but you should also do a careful analysis of what that will cost you when you build a project if you offer those, okay? So we're going to show you a scenario on how to do that. Right now, we're going to look at an annual income of $27,000. Okay, that's not a lot of money, but we're low income people. They have 4 dependents. It's that $480 dependent deduction. They have child care cost of $1,080. So their total adjustments for that family is $3,000. Their adjusted annual income is now $24,000. So you take that adjusted monthly income, 24,000 divided by 12, and that's 2,000, okay? Their monthly gross rent, 2,000 times 30%, the most you're allowed to charge them is $600. So we got a utility allowance of $250 in this case scenario, a monthly rent of $350. The annual revenue you're going to make off of that unit is $4,200. Okay, so $350, 12 months a year if they paid everything they owed you. So we're going to build another project. 100 units. Okay, so it's a really, really big project. You're using all the money that you've got. You've been good in competition, things like that. And you got to sit down with your board or your tribal council and you got to decide how much are we going to charge for this 100 unit project. So we're going to use that same scenario of that family. Okay, that adjusted monthly income of $2,000. Now, if we charged them 30%, the most we could charge, the monthly rent would be $600. In this case, we're going to try, because it cost us a lot of money to build 100 units, to preserve as much of our yearly formula, our grant, our subsidy as we can. So we're not going to give a utility allowance, okay? So net rent payment of $600, got 100 units. Our monthly revenue, if we collected everything, would be $60,000. The annual revenue for all 100 houses, okay, collecting everything, would be $720,000. The annual expenses to run a 100-unit project for the admin, utilities, all the things that the housing entity has to provide is $900,000 across the board. Regardless of what you do, it's $900,000, okay? So with that scenario, charging the most you could, 30%, no utility, you're still going to need $180,000 worth of that subsidy on a yearly basis to run those 100 units. And that's if you collected everything, which does not happen. Okay, so then you got your generous housing program. And I've seen all the way to the very generous end, okay? They're only going to charge 20%. Drops that monthly gross rent to $400. They're going to give a utility allowance, $100. Doesn't seem like it's much. Okay. Now the rent is $300. So the monthly revenue is $30,000 if they collected everything, $360 in annual revenue. Still got $900,000 in expenses. Now it's going to take $540,000 worth of your block grant subsidy on a yearly basis to run that 100-unit project. Then you have the very generous IHA. They're going to charge 10%. They're going to give a $200 utility allowance. And at that point, you're not going to make anything. Okay. Annual expenses are still $900,000. So it's going to take $900,000 on a yearly basis of your block grant subsidy. So when it comes time to develop a project, whether it be a 5-unit project, a 10-unit project, a 20, you can make different rules for every project. You don't have to do the same things. You don't have to offer the same subsidies. You don't have to charge the same amount of rents. But what you need to do is make sure you run the scenario so you can make your board members or your governing body can make that informed decision about the cause and effect of those decisions. Okay. So potential issues if you're outside of your jurisdiction. So on land, the tribe has sovereignty or civil jurisdiction over the tribe and the TDHE. We can limit assistance to our Indian families and provide tribal preference. If you utilize block grant funds and other funds and you mix it, you could actually become subject to non-discrimination requirements used for affordable housing projects. You will also have to become aware of a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. We are not allowed to pay taxes with NAHASDA funds, okay? You have to put forth an agreement, get the township or wherever you're building involved for housing developed off a reservation or on non-trust land. You have to ensure that you can get ambulance service and fire service and water and things like that. And you're not allowed to pay the taxes to them. So you can read about that in the regs at 240 through 246. And there is in your reference materials a local cooperation agreement guidance. It's 2003-02. So happy reading. Make sure that if you're going to build off of the reservation, you're aware of that up front. So the local cooperation agreement within the NAHASDA statute, what does it say? Notwithstanding any other provision of this act, grant amounts provided under this act on behalf of an Indian tribe may not be used for rental or lease purchase homeownership units that are owned by the recipient for the tribe unless the governing body of the locality within which the property subject to the development activities to be assisted with the grant amounts is or will be situated has entered into an agreement with the recipient for the tribe, providing the local cooperation agreement required by the secretary pursuant to this act. The secretary can waive the requirements of this subsection and subsection D if the recipient has made a good faith effort to fulfill the requirements of this subsection and subsection D and agrees to make payments in lieu of taxes to the appropriate taxing authority, which is allowed, in an amount consistent with the requirements of subsection D2 until such time as the matter of making such payments has been resolved in accordance with subsection D. Okay. So exemption from taxes, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, grant amounts provided under this act on behalf of an Indian tribe may not be used for affordable housing activities under the act, for rental or lease purchase dwelling units developed under the Housing Act of 37, or with amounts provided under this act that are owned by the recipient for the tribe, unless such dwelling units, which in the case of units in a multi-unit project shall be exclusive of any portions of the project not developed under the Housing Act of 37, or with amounts provided under this act are exempt from all real and personal property taxes levied or imposed by any state, tribe, city, county, or other political subdivision. And the recipient for the tribe makes annual payments of user fees to compensate such government for the cost of providing governmental services, including police and fire protection, roads, water, sewage, utility systems, and related facilities, or payments in lieu of taxes to such a taxing authority in an amount equal to the greater of 150 per dwelling unit, or 10% of the difference between the shelter rent and the utility cost, or such lesser amount as prescribed by the state, tribal, or local law, is agreed to by the local governing body in the agreement under subsection C, or the recipient and local governing body agree that such user fees or payments in lieu of taxes shall not be made. So I've worked with the tribe that ran into this situation where they purchased properties after they were already built. So they didn't go in negotiating right off the bat with the jurisdiction of the tribe, or with the city which the tribe purchased these units. And HUD in that particular area would not take a no. It's like, you need to go negotiate these agreements. It was a finding because of that fact. And, sometimes there's things that the executive director, I tell them to go to a higher level, because I didn't think the executive director should be negotiating on behalf of the tribe. We contacted the lawyer, the tribal chairperson, but made them, the council aware of what was happening. And the lawyer helped with that and those negotiations. So there's sometimes the ED doesn't do that, but you have to be made aware of it, and you have to involve the appropriate people within the tribe to do that. Okay, so those are one of those situations. If you're not on reservation land, or you're going to buy something off a reservation land, pay attention to those. Okay, so our poll question: what do you see as a major barrier to home ownership in your community? While you're voting, I'll tell you what we did. Um, I was very, very lucky. The assistant director, when I was at the housing authority, was a past banker. She, very, very smart lady, and she would run the credit checks. Had the ability for all three agencies to run the credit checks on our tribal members, and then we would try to straighten out the credit. Um, and we had down payment assistance. You have to be careful what you ask for, because they put us in charge of the utilities when we complained about those. Um, was upset about some of the land, and then we had the land office given to us. So you got to be careful what you complain about or what you ask for. But it was almost, and then the IHS programs. So it was like a one-stop shop for our tribal members. We would, try to fix that bad credit if they had any. A lot of times, in Indian country, it's the result of Indian health bills. I hate to say that, but they are not always paid timely, sometimes argued. Um, so we did the down payment assistance, and we would try to straighten out the credit, and we would utilize the USDA program for our really low income people. We'd utilize the 184 program for our middle of the road people. And the ones with really good credit, we had a bank that would do conventional lending, which was the cheapest way to do it. All cost involved, but not all people can qualify. So that's what we used to do. Okay, so end the poll, and we have straight across the board, basically, a lack of. Do you want to throw it back up, my girl? A lack of funds, a lack of insufficient income for mortgage payments, poor credit, lack of infrastructure, no land available, and other. So we came across the lack of infrastructure. So when we did the 80 unit project I was telling you about yesterday, we put in another 20 homes ready with water and sewer. That helped a lot with the conventional mortgages. And then we had one more spot of land, but there was no infrastructure whatsoever. We put away money every year in small amounts. And then they started, asking for grants and things like that. And finally, they started building up there last year. But it took a while. It cost a lot of money. Thanks, my girl. To get into parts where there's no infrastructure present at all. So you can do home purchase assistance, home ownership activities, acquisition of existing housing if you have it, and then reacquisition with rehab, purchase of existing mutual help units. That we did. Our families would, after the kids grew up, you'd sometimes have a mom and a dad and one remaining child, or sometimes no remaining child, and we would buy them back. I mean, there was no way that we could purchase a home of that size, everything in place, or build one of that size with everything in place as cheap as we could purchase one. We were very fair to our tribal members, and then we would try to get the remaining ones a different, smaller property. So purchase of existing mutual help homes, always ask for the right of first refusal with your banks, and with when you have any involvement in the mortgage process for your tribal members. Construction for units to sell is another thing. You kind of learn that the first probably 5 or 10, I was spending a whole lot of time on the first mortgages trying to get. Our tribal members don't know the exact process to build a house. This has got to be done before this is done. You got to have this in place before you can do this. And then it was like, okay, you guys, if you're going to do this, you got to get a really good general contractor to help you out and do this on your behalf, because very few people know all that is involved in building a house from scratch. So that's another thing you're going to have to kind of build into that process. Construction for units to sell, then you just do it yourself. Remember, total development costs, that PIH 2022-16, we can only spend so much money. Pursuant to the regulations at 1,156, affordable housing developed, acquired, or assisted under your block grant program must be of moderate design and subject to limitations on cost or design size. Types of units, you can do single family, you can do duplex, triplex, condominium, mobile home, multi-use, apartment buildings. So our apartment buildings were in pods of 4 units in each pod. We had a 12 unit and a couple of 20 unit ones. Units can be stick built or manufactured. When you go into manufacturing, you're buying more than 1 or 2 homes, you can spec them. Okay, we need this type of roof load, we need this kind of drywall, anything you want. And they'll do that for you. And there's our different, forms of land ownership. They can include leasehold, allotted, individual trust, and fee simple. So your financing tools, you can use home buyer assistance, grants for down payments, reduce closing cost, purchase financing, principal buy down, interest reduction, developer assistance, grants, loans, deferred payment loans, donated land, cover infrastructure cost, construction financing. So when we did the mutual help units, at first we did a little bit of the self-help, basically, and we let them clear lots and things like that. There's unless you have tenants that are skilled in the trades, contractors really don't like them present. You have those insurance risk and things like that. What the tribe did is every mutual help we built quite a few of them, were put on 1 acre parcels of land. We valued the land at the $1,500 contribution at that time. So that's how we got around the contribution for mutual help. But you can design programs like that. I know that after NAHASDA came about, there was a lot of tribes that liked the mutual help program, and they continue to run programs just like them. Different sources of leverages, 184, state agencies, rural housing, federal home loan bank. They're good for down payment assistance and things like that. Private lenders, the tribal lenders, and owner cash. So you can do it a lease with an option to purchase a program like that. The tribe leases the land to the housing authority. The housing authority obtains 184 loans. They enter into mutual help and occupancy agreements or something very similar with your tenants. They sell the home to them after the assignment. Upon debt retirement, the tribe leases to the family. And it's just a big old circle, so you can do that too. So lease with option of purchase, example language. If you're going to start a program like that, got to purchase the home at the time that you qualify for the loan. You got to qualify for a Section 184 or whatever financing you're using within a maximum of 36 months. Basically, they want you in and out of the program that quick. Have to enroll in a homebuyer education class until you're mortgage ready. And sufficient income to qualify for a $100,000 loan or whatever that threshold in your community will be. It costs a lot more money to build in California or Alaska than it does in Michigan. I mean, what they could build a 2-3 bedroom with, I could build a mansion with in Michigan, so it depends on where you live. Your lease with option to purchase example, Florida for that matter also. Good credit profile, 80% of median income, your low income, stable employment, 2 years perhaps in the same industry, not the same job. Sufficient income to meet income targeting requirements, no judgments against you or the family or your other loan holder, and your collections have to be paid off. Underwriting home buyers, steps to look at a prospective home buyer, what kind of cash requirements, debt to income ratios, loan to value ratios, and what kind of credit. Your 4 C's of credit, down payment, that capacity, the capital, the capacity, the collateral, and the character. Down payment, the expense to income ratio, the loan to value ratio, and their willingness to pay, and then your closing cost. What is their remaining debt to income ratio? Program options, management, recipient, nonprofit, developer. You can manage tasks. Application intake, home buyer selection, loan servicing. Those are all different things. Home buyer payment. The mortgage payment's not capped. A lease purchase home buyer payment capped at 30% of income. Non-low income family cannot get the same level of benefit unless they're deemed an essential family. Your resale restrictions, useful life, who can buy, repayment, type of binding commitment. I know that it kind of scared me at first when I went out and did a mortgage on reservation land. I can only sell to somebody from Bay Mills or give it to my children. And when you're sinking a big, I actually put one on here, built it, and then almost paid it off and put, a whole bunch of money and really designed it the way that I wanted. And both times, it's like, okay, am I going to find somebody that's able to buy this if I decide to sell it? But you gotta look at things like that. So, who can buy that home? So a life estate, again, this is the same realm. This is sample language, but you have to become aware of that. I've worked with tribes that the council, they have turnover in councils and things like that, and nobody looked at that. And they had mutual help units and things, houses that conveyed to people that were not members of the tribes. I told them, put a life estate so they're like my husband. He can stay here for the rest of his natural life, but his house has got to be sold to a Bay Mills tribal member or our children. Because he's from a different tribe. He can't legally own it, although he's legally responsible for that payment. He's on that mortgage. That's what can happen. So you got to look, especially, we have a lot of tribes on Canadian borders. We border Canada. Where I was in Alaska borders Canada. My business partner, Buddy, she's in New York. she's Akwesasne. They border Canada. Montana, all the way across the board. We have a lot of our Indian communities that share grounds with Canada, and those Canadian citizens are often dual enrolled, but you have to make sure that you take things like that into consideration also. Okay. Your home ownership rehab, another, program that if you can't get the banks into the area, you can offer to at least assist the tribal members, with some of those old BIA homes and things like that, or the mutual help homes that have conveyed. Program options: whole house rehab. You could do selected rehab, accessibility improvements, let them age in place, energy conservation, green retrofitting, mold remediation. Have that in a lot of places. The level of rehab can be substantial or a moderate rehabilitation. Is it maintenance versus rehab? There is a notice that is provides guidance. It's CPD 2016-02, provides guidance on what maintenance is versus rehab. Just for reading pleasure. Types of units: conveyed mutual help units, HIP units. That's a BIA program. Privately owned and developed units. Got to remember, and this is where we have a lot of slippage, you go and you do rehab, you do energy assistance, you do things like that. You got to make sure that there is no use lead-based paint in place. A lot of times everything we built was built after lead-based paint was, in effect. So we didn't have to worry about it. But when you start spending money on down payment, TBRA, modernization, any of this, you got to look at the age of that unit. Is there any lead-based paint? You got to have somebody on your staff that's good at that. Okay. Also, the useful life and the insurance requirements are going to kick in. Anything over $5,000 usually. Okay. If your units were built after 1978, okay, there's no lead. But you got to remember, like I said, when you put money into it for rehab and different other things. So what are your eligible costs? You got hard costs: property improvements, removal of lead-based paint is allowable expense, energy efficiency, systems, whatever kind you need, water, heat, utility connections, handicap accessibility. Soft cost: your engineering, your engineers, architects, marketing, inspections. You got to still inspect those units if you're spending that money. Financing fees and environmental review. Your assistance limits. Remember that TDC, that total development cost. And then, are we going to serve many families with little assistance or a few families with full assistance? Okay. I've worked with people that go both ways and tried to make an argument to their tribal councils. You're giving away large sums of money, and only able to serve 4 or 5 of your tribal members a year, where if you cut that in a fifth, which is still a whole bunch of money, you'd be able to serve at least 25 a year. So financial assistance can include, again, grants, loans, deferred payment loans, and leveraging with other programs. Other forms of leveraging for this, again, 184 home rural development has a 504 program. BIA home ownership improvement program, that's your HIP. Indian Community Development Block Grant, Title VI, and a low income housing tax credits. And underwriting, you can look at the family income and income source, the regularity of the income, the expenses, family size, the income available to pay off a loan. And then your construction management can be force account, sweat equity, or contractor. Your housing quality standards, you can use housing quality standards. You can write your own rehab that the tribe adopts, or use your national code and local ordinances. Always got to inspect. So your inspection and work write-ups, conduct inspections, develop your work write-ups, and estimate cost. That paper trail is huge when it comes to procurement. Okay, guys, HUD will be there. Make sure that you've got good documentation. Other housing programs. There's many options for service programs, housing services, housing management services, crime prevention programs, and you can do model programs. Like I told you yesterday, the drug dog, lots of different things you can do. Has to tie to affordable housing. So when you're using block grant funds, beneficiaries of services must be low income and Native American families. NAHASDA units, 37 Housing Act units, or other housing that qualifies under Title II. If you're doing broader programs, you've got to prorate those costs between your funding sources. So your types of housing services, housing counseling, resident programs, job programs, homeless prevention, youth activities, and tenant-based rental assistance. So resident services are typically training to help your residents become renters or home buyers. It often works to increase homeownership, meet housing standards, to foster life skills, and you can offer case management approaches. Okay. Tenant-based rental assistance helps some of your families to afford rental housing. You see this a lot in like Washington State, where it's so expensive. Typically done as a payment to a property owner. Could be portable, move with the family. Family's payment is capped at, again, 30% of that adjusted income. TBRA can also be used to assist with deposit, other move-in cost, help with college students. Your program design options, generally it's a community-wide program, a self-sufficiency program, targeted. You can do targeted populations, like your college students, anti-displacement, security deposit program, if that's what you decide you need, or like I said, just plain old college student housing. So example amount of subsidy, the fair market rent cap minus the 30% of adjusted income would be the maximum subsidy you would help the family with. Or you can do a minimum tenant payment with a 30% test, your established dollar amount or a percentage of that income. So housing management there, inspections, specifications, loan processing, tenant selection, mediation, and managing that TBRA program. Because you still got to make sure that there's no lead-based paint in the house that they rent, because your money is there. So crime prevention and safety. You can do physical improvements, fencing, speed bumps, locks, lights, and if you have a high area of, I guess you would say activity, I've even seen security lights with cages so you can't shoot them out. You can get things like that. I've seen our apartment buildings had cameras that went straight down the hallways so you could see, who's going in and out in the hallways and the parking lots. I've actually seen in Minnesota where they had a channel on the TV where the tenants could see who was walking around out in the parking lots and things like that. Depends on how you want to do it, So services, you can do security personnel, patrol equipment, but remember, it's for your low income participants. Community facilities, community centers, recreation centers that service them, typically done as a model activity, has to be tied to that affordable housing. Other model activities, office building for your housing staff, warehouse, maintenance facility for housing, your maintenance barns, daycare for residents, student housing, upgrade a generator system. That would be a big thing in Florida, water treatment systems. So your delivery options, the tribe or the TDHE, allows for an effective control of task. Make sure you have the needed expertise and the capacity. As a subrecipient, you can typically, find a nonprofit, sign a written agreement, requires a flow down. You have to monitor the activities of any subrecipient, okay? That makes you responsible for the self-monitoring. So your poll question, what housing programs are you now offering your tribe, at your tribe, or your TDHE? Rental housing, home ownership, rehab, private home ownership, lease with option to purchase, housing counseling, youth cultural programs, other rental assistance, down payment. And you can close it. We have everything across that board. Congratulations, people. Rental housing, home ownership, it's got the biggest amounts, more rental than anything. Rehab for private homeowners, down payment assistance, a lot of rental assistance, lease with option to purchase, housing counseling, and youth cultural programs. Good job. Got everything there. Okay. So, your Indian housing plan, your annual performance report. Good stuff. First of all, have you ever helped write, or did you even ever read your IHP or APR? Be honest. I'm really curious here, guys. Your APR is actually should be made available, has to be made available to the public for public comment. But sometimes you wonder, has anybody in the housing office ever read it? I wonder that anyway, because I'm kind of weird. Couple more, you guys. Anybody else going to answer? If not, we're going to close the poll. Twice as many. 2 people read this thing, guys. We had a lot more that said no. Okay. So, your Indian housing plan, and a lot of you guys didn't vote, by the way. Don't just turn me on and listen to me in the background. I know that I'm like white noise and it'll make you go to sleep, but no. So, your Indian housing plan is a document you, as the recipient, are required to put forth to get your money on a yearly basis. Okay. Prior to awarding any money, it spells out how you are going to use your funds that you get with your yearly allotment. So there's a statutory requirement, sections 102, 103 of NAHASDA, and then 24 CFR 1000. To receive those block grant funds, you have to submit the IHP and the APR annually, and HUD has to determine it to be compliant with the NAHASDA regulations. So those of you that have never looked at one, this is what the first page looks like. And by signing the IHP, you're certifying you have all the required policies and procedures in place. So somebody needs to read that and then look for all your policies and procedures and make sure they're in place. Okay? Because that's one of the first things you're going to get in trouble for. Lots of times your tribal chairman's making that certification. So make sure you got it. Okay? And if you have minimum funding, you have to make sure that you have households below 80%, because when you're getting minimum funding, they're basically making an assumption that you're in a higher income area. Depending on your program activities, that you're going to have adequate insurance coverage for units that are owned, operated, or assisted with grant amounts. That's your rehab programs, down payment assistance, things like that. That you have eligibility, admission, and occupancy policies that govern the rents charged, including the methods, how they're determined, management and maintenance of your housing units. So you got to have all those policies in place. And the recognized tribal government of the grant beneficiary certifies that they have reviewed it. That's your certification page. So the 1-year plan is a plan of action for the use of that block grant allocation. You're going to describe your existing housing stock, assess your housing needs, determine how you're going to allocate your resources. And the guidance at that is 2018-02. And I am expecting basically this year for that to probably be rewritten because of the gems. So your IHP is your activities plus your budget equal your IHP. Hopefully they equal out. So it's an Indian housing plan. It's required by HUD in order to get those funds. It's a roadmap to responding to the housing needs of your tribal members. It spells out how you're going to intend to use the funds you get under your block grant. Your IHBG recipient, either the tribe or your tribally designated housing entity, if you're a tribal department, submit the IHP or APR. If you are an umbrella tribe, that's the word that is used most, and you see a lot of that with the rancherias and up in Alaska. Okay, these are our smaller tribe, and the Pueblos, actually. So if the TDHE has been designated by more than one tribe, they can submit a separate IHP for each one of them, or a single IHP for all the tribes within their jurisdictions. You got to make sure that you have the tribal certifications with them if that's the case. So when do you do it? 75 days, the IHP, prior to the start of your program year. It's supposed to be an effective management tool that allows you to have it in place at the start of your program year. If you don't get it in, you can lose your money. Okay, so they're only allowed to give you, I think, a 60-day extension for the IHP. You'll often, I don't want to say this, but they'll say submit it even if it's wrong and get the clock ticking. They don't want to take your money. They will walk you through how to put that thing together, and you can hire people to do it also. Don't not turn it in, okay? Don't bury your head and ignore it or whatever. Should you suddenly lose a director, we lost a good friend in Indian country that's been around for years this week, and he was serving as a director. So right now they're without one. Should something happen to you like that, you need that stuff up on a board when your IHPs, when your APRs, when those things are due, so everybody knows. And if they get fired, they quit, they walk out, whatever happens, you make sure that IHP gets in. You call the HUD office and you say, hey, is this due? They'll find out for you. They will help you. Don't ignore it. What if the congressional appropriations are delayed? And that happens a lot. I mean, there was one time it was months and months and months. So if the program year estimate is available, you base the IHP on that. What's listed on that formula response form. That formula response form used to get mailed to you. Now you have to get online for it. Okay. You should, otherwise you use the grant amount from your previous program year. So you can use the amount for last year. You fix it when you do your APR, okay? You revise the IHP internally when the amount is known, and then you update the APR to include the actual amount. And that step you have to do, okay? So extensions can be granted under exceptional circumstances, but that's what I was talking about. The next thing is HUD cannot waive the due date outside the statutory limit provided in Section 101 of NAHASDA, okay? So it's 90 days. I'm sorry, it's not 60. So you have 3 months to play with there, but that's not a whole lot of time. Anytime before or after your submission deadline, extension can only be granted for up to 90 days after your original deadline. Okay. So don't let that happen to you, because you won't get money for the whole year. On the 91st day, there's nothing that can be done. So late appropriations, like I said, has happened. And if you're a small tribe, that's when it really affects you. So if you're, if those appropriations are delayed, you can access interim funding. HUD will put out a notice. And if you have your IHP approved and you meet certain other conditions, okay, what is that? As long as you don't have a whole bunch of money sitting in ELOCs and you actually need the money, you can get interim funding from the local ONAP office. They'll give you an advance on those funds. To take advantage of that flexibility, your authorizing official has to submit a written request to HUD. I always call them first and say, what do I do and who do I send it to? And then they're aware of the situation. Okay. So these are the due dates, July 1st, 2024. The due date was April 17th. The waiver deadline, July 16th. So if you were in that situation, you have now passed go because today is the 17th. October 1st, 2024, due date's July 18th. Okay, means it's due tomorrow. Your waiver deadline's October 16th. Maximum 90 days after the due date, only under circumstances beyond the tribe or TDHE's control, such as a natural disaster, or they understand your executive director is not there, So we now use GEMS. So it's the Grant Evaluation and Management System. It's new. Everybody's learning about it. This is the guidance 2023-26, implementing the required use of the Grants Evaluation and Management System. Okay. It's got active links within it. You can, get right to the website. There's self-registration, login, user guide. It seems fairly easy to use. So the subject on the guidance is informs the Office of Native American Program grantees of the requirement to use GEMS effective the day of this notice for certain grant administration functions. It replaces the use of EPIC, which is the Energy and Performance Information Center, and therefore supersedes Notice PIH 21815. That's why I said we're going to get a new notice this year, because it superseded it. Background on 2023, August 18th of 2023, ONAP issued a Dear Tribal Leader letter announcing the rollout of GEMS, an online grant administrative system that will manage most aspects of the grant workflow for the grant programs. ONAP's goal for GEMS is to improve the administration of tribal housing programs and simplify the grant management process for all tribal grantees. The use requirement, effective the day of this notice, we're required to submit SF 425s for all ONAP administered grant programs. So the great thing is they were putting GEMS in effect, and we all used to have to do our 425s on a quarterly basis. And they decided that unless you were an investment tribe, now we only have to do it once a year. So it was a good thing they were looking into this, I guess. But if you're a smaller tribe that struggles, if you are a tribal department, I would suggest still doing your 425s on a quarterly basis, because if something happens, and it's not something happens, because it will help you track if you're not really good, and you need those figures to do your IHP and APR. If they do the quarterly reports, it's easier to find out areas where you could be struggling, okay? And it's easier to build that puzzle back. Sometimes that's the weakest or the biggest problem with becoming a tribal department, is the finance portion. That finance person is not used to all of our HUD requirements, okay? When the finance is done in-house, they're trained. They know exactly you can't spend the money until, you you do your environmentals. You can't spend IHBG and utilize the community development block grant, Peter to pay Paul, those little things. The certain expenditures you're not allowed to make. So those are areas that some of our tribal departments fight with. So in those cases, I would still ask if they do quarterly 425s because it helps. So you submit those Indian housing plans, those annual performance reports, and related documents for the Indian Housing Block Grant formula. GIMS will retain all the submitted documents for future reference by grantees and ONAP staff. Prior to the publication of this notice, data was transferred from EPIC to GIMS. Okay, so IHPs, APRs, 425 submitted in EPIC are archived and accessible by ONAP staff if needed. So the registration and access, you need to set up an account through this link. The resources are also in links, and Brooke is so busy in the background giving us active links within here for you guys, for the GIM website, for the self-registration, for the login. That user guide is really important, okay? Get it and download it. So notice PIH 2022-15, the Federal Financial Report, SF 425, and Program Guidance. That link is also there. So the future of GIMS. ONAP continues to develop future releases of GIMS that will include more reporting modules and functions for additional ONAP grant programs. With future releases, grantees are going to be required to use each new GIMS functionality. Grantees will be notified of additional functions and requirements via program guidance or Dear Tribal Leader letters. Okay, that's why it's so important, even if you're not a tribal leader, to read that section. GIMS training and technical assistance will be provided by your area ONAP and the ONAP GIMS team. So requesting HUD's approval to submit via email or post. This applies if you are an area where there is no internet. And I have been in areas where there is no internet, even in this day. And this will allow you to submit anything you need to submit to HUD by utilizing that. So what's the difference when you're doing your IHP and your APR between a program and a project? A program is an ongoing activity. They're in every IHP. They're your maintenance. They're your admin. Projects have start and end dates. They're dependent upon your annual funding decision. How much development are we going to do? How much rental assistance are we going to provide? So the key sections of the IHP, the cover page, the housing needs section, program descriptions, maintaining the 37 Housing Act. Okay, I told you they were very, very stringent if you are getting that CAS, that 37 housing subsidy for rentals. Okay, not very many of you guys probably get mutual help, but your rental subsidy. The budget is section 5. Your other submission items are 6, and your certifications are 7 through 9. This will give you a glimpse at what it is. You need to know tax ID numbers. You need to know the DUNS number, which is required for all federal grants. Your CCR SAM expiration date, updated annually. Okay, that's another thing. We used to get locked out of locks, as I said. We have to make sure that we keep our passwords and things up to date. So if you have a turnover in the people that do this stuff, make sure you pay attention to it as soon as you can, because these things you have to discover and make sure that they have not expired. Okay. So housing needs is the second section, describes the type of needs of your recipients, how many low-income families, the needs for them, description of how your activities are going to meet their needs, and your geographic distribution of funds. Section 3 is your program descriptions, your outputs. Again, program description, eligibility, the eligible activity that you propose to do, your intended outcomes, your beneficiaries, who's going to benefit, and what kind of assistance, and how many, what's your planned output. So when you do this, Homeowner and rental are two different things, okay? You don't combine home ownership and rental construction, acquisition, rehab. For example, if you're constructing 5 homeowner and 5 rental units, they have to be 2 separate activities. They're 2 different sets of participants, basically, okay? 2 different sets of rules. So your programs, your eligible activities, your outcomes, your outputs, programs, what recipient specific programs are going to be funded, eligible activities. There's actually a list. You pick a list tied to your NAHASDA eligible activities. Outcomes, what is the intended goal? Pick the list, okay, from the list. And outputs, how many units or households are planned, okay? Program, this is an example. We're going to provide purchase assistance for first-time home buyers who wish to buy in the Tri-County area. That was ours. Eligible activity, we're going to give down payment and closing cost. Outcome, we're going to assist renters to become homeowners. Who's going to be assisted? Well, our low-income families. Level and type of assistance, it's going to be a $5,000 cap, so we can get around perhaps the different guidelines for insurance and other things you have to pay attention to, and the planned output, 4 units. I'm going to try small. This is when we first started. Okay, so this is a guidance on allowability, outcomes, outputs. Some are measured by unit, some by household, some by dollars. Okay, so this will help you distinguish that. Disposition. So this is your 1937 Act. Let's say you have a rental project. I had one of 10 that I did this with. Okay, we looked at rehabbing them and came up with the conclusion that would be cheaper to rebuild in the same footprint than it was to rehab them. So it's called the demolition disposition. How you're going to maintain those 37 Housing Act units. You describe any planned demo dispo. We had to get, statements from Indian Health Service, show them all of the background, proving that it was cheaper to do that, more cost efficient. And how you're going to maintain those units, what you're going to do with those tenants in the meanwhile, and how long it's going to take you to do it. But they want you to do it within a year so you don't lose that subsidy, okay? There's the statutory and the regulatory sections, 102B2. It tells you it's a statute. Sources of funds. Describe your funding sources to be used for housing purposes. Funds on hand at the beginning of the year, what you expect to receive, anticipated expenditures for each funding source, unexpended funds for each source at the end of the year, include anticipated receipt and use of any program income. Okay. Describe recipient's program in which funds will be used. Prior and current year IHBG funds anticipated to be expended on each program. Prior and current year other funds anticipated to be expended on each program. If you've got tribal funds or whatever. And then your other submission items. Your useful life that I was just talking about. Model activities and over income. Tribal preferences. Administration. And if you have an expanded formula area. If you have an expanded formula area, you have to prove where you're helping your tribal members that are not within your local formula area, okay? So the certifications, compliance, tribal certification, tribal wage rates, and self-monitoring. So timeframes for IHP review, 60 days for the original submission. And then if you have any amendments, they have 30 days to review it. So the critical review points, is it complete? Are all required elements included? Eligibility, are all the activities eligible? Are they affordable housing activities under the statute? Consistency, this is HUD's language. Are all key sections of the IHP internally consistent in a meaningful way? So revisions are only required for the following reason. You want to add a new activity. You can do that at any time, let's say the 10% authority, okay? Or if you reduce the amount budgeted for operation and maintenance of your formula current assisted stock, that FCAS, those 37 housing units, they want to know why you're reducing that amount, because you got to take care of them. Remember, I told you they're very strict about that. So your APR is the flip side of this document. One tells you what you did, or you're going to do. One tells you what you did. So it describes the performance for the previous year. It highlights how you ensured compliance and financial accountability. It provides statistics on unit quality, cost, and program outcomes used by the recipient, tribal members, and HUD to provide feedback for program performance. Why is it important? It's a statutory requirement. You got to have public comment. Okay, so this one I searched on for a long time. Can't find it. Called the HUD offices, called 3 of them, I think, and they all told me the same thing. The sweet spot seems to be 2 weeks. Okay, you're supposed to make it available to the public for comment. So now when you're looking at APRs due on this day, you got to back it up that far for public comment, and you got to back it up again because your governing body needs to approve it. Okay, so this due date becomes probably at least a month earlier. So it's a tool to track your IHP progress. It's a self-assessment. It's planning. It's technical assistance necessary from HUD. Why? Because you're going to do your self-monitoring. You're going to find out if you're lacking in any areas, okay, or weak, or need strengthening, and the public information by posting it. Key sections: the actual outcomes versus the outputs, your program accomplishments, the budget, the expanded formula area, self-monitoring, inspections, audits, public accountability, jobs supported by NAHASDA. The information requested for the APR includes the following: the name of the recipient, the name and title of the person authorized to submit the APR, the signature of the person authorized to submit the APR, and the date of the submission. The purpose is to document the recipient's performance review. The statutory regs are 404A, B, 2, B3, 24 CFR 1005-12. The key components are: what are our accomplishments? What are the reasons for delays? Okay. And what are the outputs? What does this mean? It means that if you put something in the IHP, you should plan on doing it. I have been in places where they say they're going to do something, and I look at 3 years worth of IHPs and APRs, and they haven't done it once. If you're not going to do it, or you don't think you're going to do it, take it out. You can put it in there at any time you want. Okay? You're basically failing when you say you're going to do something and you don't. Okay? It's really important. We have slippage there. Okay, there's room for improvement there, or reduce the amount. You can always increase it, but don't put it in there just because it's always been there if you're not doing it. So reporting on the budget describes the actual sources and uses of funds for the 12-month program year. Reporting on submission items. There's a new section where the recipient describes expenditure of funds in an expanded formula area. You don't have to do it if you haven't expanded your formula area. But if you have, you need to show them where you're spending that money. I remember sitting in a meeting in DC with a great big group of people, and this coming up and them saying, well, how do you know who you serve in your expanded formula area? And we kind of turned around and looked, and it's like, come on now. I wanted to say, come on now, dude. If you're servicing them, you have all the information. That means you're not servicing them. And there's people that expanded areas and they didn't service their tribal members there. That's not fair to the rest of us. And then there's people that service their tribal members outside of there, and they need to do just the opposite. They need to expand that service area if they want to, actually service those members there. And there's a way to do that, but you got to be able to track that. Certifications, self-certifications of compliance, and saying that you're going to self-monitor. What did you do? What kind of self-monitoring did you do? What did you discover? So in accordance with statutes, you certify it's going to comply with the Civil Rights Act. That certification about if you receive under $200,000 that you have people that are at or below 80% of median income. Depending on your program activities, policies are in effect, your A&O policies that we talked about, all those same ones are still in there. Timeline, 60 days to review the APR. That's what HUD has, to make recommendations, and they send a report to you as a recipient. It appears that you have carried out your eligible activities in a timely manner and accordance with NAHASDA. You've complied with your IHP, and they have deemed the report accurate. Okay. So the assessment, is it on time? It's due within 90 days at the end of the program year. Is it complete? Do you have sufficient data for review? Is it accurate? Can you prove what you're reporting? Did you make any progress on your program or any type of performance issues? Have you done your self-monitoring there? What is the importance? It ensures compliance with the rules and requirements, with the tribe and the TDHE policies and procedures, consistency with your IHP, efficiency, and effectiveness. Why? To demonstrate accountability for your performance, to build your organizational capacity, to ensure compliance with the regulations, to identify system weaknesses, to improve efficiency and effectiveness of practices. It's the process of recording the operations of a system, observing, reviewing activities over the course of a year, detecting deficiencies, taking steps to correct them, reporting through the annual compliance assessment and annual performance report. To observe and review activities over the course of a year, detect deficiencies, take steps to correct them, record and report through the annual compliance assessment and APR, and assess compliance with the IHP, the law, and the regulations. Okay. So there are monitoring links in here that will help you for your procurement, for your finance, for your A&O. Okay. Go through the A&O one. Go through your own files. If you find that there's somebody in there that you admitted that was over income, slap a big old red flag on the front of the file and say it was discovered during self-monitoring. How'd you fix it? We took an admissions and an occupancy course. HUD pulls 10% of the files. They pull this one. I don't think you're going to get a monitoring finding because you discovered it yourself. Okay. It's going to be there forever and ever. You have to keep it in that file forever. It's going to get pulled sooner or later. Might as well identify it yourself. That's just my thoughts on it. So, have you ever taken part in self-monitoring? Yes, no, or I don't know. Brooke, can you tell me my page number?
Yeah, you're on slide 132.
Okay. Anybody else going to answer? Got a whole bunch more people in here than that are answering our questions. Okay. I am going to end it, even though I've got less than half of you guys answering. We got a pretty much even split. We got a couple I don't knows, some definite no's, and about half that says yes. Okay, you can close that down. So your self-monitoring requirements are found under the statute at 403B, periodic monitoring, not less frequently than annually, okay? You're supposed to do self-monitoring on a yearly basis of at least one part of your organization, okay? But you're supposed to review all your activities. So, review the activities conducted, housing assisted under the act, okay? You're also supposed to have your boots in every unit, including your home ownership once a year. You're supposed to recertify your tenants, even if they're paying the max. Why? Because you have to guarantee that you're not overcharging them and you have to be able to prove it. Okay? Such review shall include an on-site inspection of housing to determine compliance with the applicable requirements. The results of each review shall be included in the performance report of the recipient, that's your APR, submitted to the Secretary under Section 404 and made available to the public. Because your APR you put out there for like 2 weeks. 1502, the recipient is responsible for monitoring grant activities to ensure compliance with the applicable federal requirements and monitoring performance goals under the IHP. So, you must monitor grant activities in accordance with the IHP, complete a compliance assessment, including unit inspections, develop a corrective action plan to address any areas of noncompliance, must include a summary of the results and corrective actions in the APR. Well, we requested technical assistance to correct this problem, or we've taken, this course. Sometimes well, never mind. I was going to say sometimes they require a certificate, but that's usually when it's a monitoring finding. But get some training if that's where the weakness is. So the perspective, ONAP's perspective, okay? Monitor performance against your goals, check relevance and quality of your activities, identify issues internally before your other partners, and solve your problems promptly. So a sample self-monitoring schedule is usually throughout the year. You don't wait until the month before the APR. Oh, we're supposed to do self-monitoring. I know it's easy to do. I did it myself. I got to be honest. At first, we did it ourselves. And it's like, we know we have to do this. We're not going to, every time you got to have this done, so do it in planning, do it in policy and procedure review, organizational structure, your financial management, your fiscal management, your administration, your admin and your occupancy, your procurement. That's a huge area. Your environmental review and your final self-monitoring report. But use those guides that are in there. They are so helpful. So, do you have a procedure and policy for self-monitoring? You got to tell them yes or no. Pursuant to 1502, did the TDHE provide periodic progress reports, including the self-monitoring report and the APR and audits to the tribe? Did you conduct self-monitoring, including monitoring any subrecipients? And the results. Describe the results. So that's the part where you got to do this. This is the page, okay? They're in your reference materials, your appendix items, whatever you want to call them. They call them appendixes in here. We call them reference materials. But for all the different areas, open these up. You're amazed at, they basically walk you through what HUD's going to look for, okay? Maintenance and inspection monitoring, environmental reviews, lead-based paint. It's got it all. Use these. These will really, really help you. Okay. So your other sections, capture your remaining required items, inspections, audits, your public accountability. That's your posting. How many jobs supported by NAHASDA and any kind of IHP waiver request. So do we have any questions? Oh my goodness, I did it on time today. April. Way to go. We're on, my lady. Brooke.
All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for another awesome presentation. I'm going to go ahead and launch the feedback survey for everybody quickly. As always, it just takes a minute to complete, helps us know what is going really well, what we could improve upon for the future. We of course want to make our webinar attendees happy. We hope you can come back tomorrow. Oh, that should say day 4, guys. My apologies. Tomorrow will be day 4 of the training. It should actually say July 18th. My bad. And you can access this recording as well as any of our other recorded webinars on our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com. There is a tab with Catheta webinars and then a whole recorded webinar section. So they go back about 2 years. You can share them with your friends, share them with your colleagues. And if you had missed day 1 and day 2, those links are both in the web links box as well as in the chat. And I will post the recording of today tomorrow morning, and I'll provide the link for that as well. Please also check out our upcoming events. We post them to our various social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an in-house produced podcast titled The Hub of Being a Native American Podcast. On that, we discuss more focused topics within tribal housing and self-determination. You can find that on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you more prefer to actually watch the videos of our interviews with the guests, then you can find the videos on our YouTube channel. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for another fantastic day. Again, this was the end of day 3, and we still have 2 more days to go, day 4 and day 5. So we hope you will see you back here tomorrow and the following day. Both of those webinars will start at 2 p.m. Eastern. It doesn't look like there are any questions coming in the chat, so I will wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, as always, Cheryl. We will talk soon. And I'm going to go ahead and close out the webinar, folks. Everybody have a great rest of the day. We hope to connect real soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. See you tomorrow.
See y'all tomorrow. Bye.